I'm sure all of you are aware of the recent food shortages occurring across the planet. It can be hard to find something to eat nowadays, given the rise in prices and surging population, especially in regards to protein. Those of us who want to stay in proper shape need an abundant source of protein in their diet, and with how things are going, it might not be possible to sustain a normal body shape. After all, you wouldn't want to be seen walking around like a slobbering mess out in public. What I want to tell you is that there is actually a very easy source of valuable nutrition, high in caloric values, come in all different varieties, and spread all across the globe. They are so prolific, in fact, that you probably have one in your house. I'm sure if you're reading this, you must already be aware of today's topic, so I'll try and keep things as brief as I can. Many of you have tried to eat one of these guys before, but found it too gross and unpalatable, often extremely fatty, with grease everywhere. There's also a strong astringent taste in many of these animals that makes it unpleasant. But once you fully understand some of the intricacies with this ingredient, while it might not be your favorite meal, you'll find it incredibly reliable when you feel like you can't take it anymore. Let me preface this by saying that this article is not a step-by-step instruction manual. These are just going to be some general guidelines you may find helpful when preparing this ingredient. I will throw a couple recipes here and there to try and illustrate my points, and I'll do my best to only use locally sourced ingredients, but take these more as suggestions. I am not a chef. These are just things that I do at home to try make this ingredient a bit more bearable for me. I encourage you to play around with it a bit, and maybe you'll find something you actually like. Step 1. Butchering. You'll be incredibly hard-pressed to find someone who will serve ready-made cuts for this type of meat. I can't imagine a human on Earth actually selling this sort of thing. If anything, they're more likely to sell them alive rather than chopped up. So you're going to have to learn how to prepare this yourself. Like any animal, you're going to want to bleed it. Make a large incision in the abdomen and remove any organs. If you're a fan of offal, you can keep them around. Just know that you'll have to remove any waste from the intestines if you plan on eating those. These guys usually don't have good diets, so all that waste tends to show in their organs. Now be careful. This animal's stomach acid is more acidic than a majority of animals. So if you're not careful, you can seriously injure yourself. I recommend tossing the stomach away, but if you want to eat the stomach, I suggest using a base like baking soda to weaken the acid prior to handling it. What you will often find, though, are chunks of metal and silicone. These are usually around the pelvis area, sometimes the chest, very often around the teeth. Just make sure you take them out. You might also take notice of the animal's exceedingly large head compared to the rest of their body. This is because they have one of the largest brain-to-body ratios of any carbon-based life form. I personally have not found the brain in my taste, but if you enjoy that sort of thing, then you'll absolutely enjoy this. From there, it's like cutting up any other animal. There will be a more detailed guide linked below showing all the cuts of meat, but for the sake of making a quick guide, I'll start to talk about how to cook it. Step 2. Preparation. Depending on where you source your meat, it's likely that it'll be high in fat and sodium. Sometimes you can even forgo using cooking oil when cooking a particularly fatty thigh or belly meat. There is a vast difference in the quality of ingredients, so use discretion when necessary. This species tends to have little in the way of parasites, so that's not a major concern. There might be some concern about prions, but I wouldn't worry about those too much. It doesn't affect our bodies in that sort of way it does for them. Some of you might like to dry age your meats, and that is a good way to enhance the flavor of the animal. But remember that there will always be around a 20% loss. If you somehow have enough protein for that, then all power to you. I'll just stick to not having to try and hide a body in a cellar for months. Regardless of the particular cut of meat you end up using, there is going to be an exceedingly high concentration of microplastics spread throughout. While these tend to accumulate more in the organs, the amount present in their muscles and fat is non-negligible. There are currently no substances on Earth that can remove these, so unless you can find a way to get off the planet or get stuff delivered from half a galaxy away, you'll just have to deal with it for now. Step 3. Cooking. Cook until the internal temperature reaches a point of 175 degrees Fahrenheit to kill off any bacteria. A good way to test the temperature is to insert one of your feelers into the meat, and once it starts to feel slightly painful, that should be good. Wow! The meat, for what it's worth, tends to be pretty similar to pork for all of you that have gotten the chance to eat that. Others have said that it might be more like venison, but I've personally never tasted venison, so I can't comment on that. So this can be used as a replacement for many pork dishes you might find in recipe books. A personal favorite of mine happens to be this dish called mapo tofu. It's a dish that uses a lot of different spices, and it tends to cover up some of the odd flavors in the meat. But what I tend to recommend is parboiling the meat. This tends to remove a lot of the fat and sodium in the meat. You can decide to do a full boil, but the meat tends to not make a great soup. You can use the bones to make a soup stock instead, and I much prefer this method, or just grind them down and eat the marrow. If you do want to use the meat in a soup, I recommend throwing away the first batch of water. It might seem incredibly wasteful to use all that water, but remember, this planet is 70% water. It's not a scarce resource like it is on other planets. If you just want to cook a steak, that's fine as well. Just know that dry bringing will amplify any flavors, so if you don't particularly enjoy the taste, then you might not like it this way. I haven't tried many offal dishes, so I won't comment on that. But as long as you follow the proper preparation steps, feel free to go wild. Conclusion. That's all for the main guide. Below I'll include a few more recipes. As for actually effectively hunting one of these, I'll have a separate guide at a later date, as it's too complicated to go over in just one article. If you're not familiar with hunting, don't be in a rush. These animals are far more dangerous than they appear, especially since the behavior patterns of this species are vastly different, and I'm sure all of your situations are unique, and just having a short hunting guide might not be helpful. So with that said, here are some recipes I like to use linked down below, as well as a guide on how to properly dismantle a human body, step by step. It was getting pretty late. Havekta was lucky that the supermarket was open later on Saturdays. With her grocery list in hand, she meandered through each aisle, grabbing only the things she needed. Havekta was thrilled. Today was her boyfriend's birthday, and she just had to get him a cake. She figured her last-minute present wouldn't be enough. Tossing the few items she picked up at the hardware department, she made a beeline for the next available register, feeling guilty for holding up the last few workers preparing to close for the day. Would this be all? The register attendant tried their very best to be engaging, but Havekta could tell that they were definitely exhausted. Yes, that's all. Thank you. I can help you with these to your car. That toolkit can be a bit awkward to carry with a cake in your hand. No worries, I'll be fine. I'm only a block away, so it should be fine. If anything, I can have my boyfriend meet me halfway to help, Havekta explains as she gracefully grabs the tool set. It looked as if she was the last person to leave the store aside from the remaining worker. The parking lot was empty, except for two beat-up Suzuki Esteems. As Havekta walked through the quiet lot, she noticed that the street lamp that would usually be flickering had now finally blown out. I'll definitely be calling the city about this. Can I help you with those? A voice from behind Havekta spoke. Turning around, she made eye contact with the person. A man about a foot or so taller than her appeared. From his attire, he looked like he had just got off from working a construction job. He made her recall that there was a new home being built at the end of her cul-de-sac. Just that week. He must be one of the workers from there. He's a lucky fellow, that boyfriend of yours, the man went on. Oh, so you were listening in on my conversation when I was in the store? I was sure I was the last customer. Guess you weren't? He shrugged. Please, I insist. If your boyfriend isn't going to meet you, at least let me help you home. It would be terrible if something happened to you out here, and I could have done something to help. Wow. That's so sweet of you. I think you and my boyfriend would get along well. Hevecta smiled as she handed over the cake and one of her grocery bags. It was surprisingly heavier than it appeared. There was wrapping paper peeking out the top, alluding to a lighter load, but the stranger thought nothing of it. And you said you don't live too far, right? That's right, Hevecta assured. That's good. I am actually doing work at one of the houses around here. We can take that road. It's not as lit as most areas, but it's more lit than that parking lot we were just in. Okay. That's fine with me. I'm sure no one would try anything with us since I'm walking with you, Hevecta went on. As they made their way to the house under construction, Hevecta noticed that she never got the stranger's name. She was walking ahead of him, and as she turned to ask him finally for it, she noticed that he was no longer following her. Did he just steal my boyfriend's birthday cake? She pondered. As she turned around, the stranger lunged at her in an effort to scare her as he shouted, "Boo!" Hevecta burst out into laughter. She was appreciative that this stranger was acting so warmly towards her. I was sure that would at least get a small squeal out of you. It'll take more than that to scare me, I'm afraid, she went on. Is that a challenge? The stranger asked. Puzzled by his tone, Hevecta proceeded to walk past the few houses that littered her block. After a few houses and one sharp turn, they made it to her home. Thank you so much for your help. I would invite you in, but my boyfriend is the jealous type, Hevecta said. No worries. If it isn't weird or too much, could I wish him a happy birthday? No, like I said, he's more of the jealous type. And one look at you would send him into a fury that I am not mentally, nor physically prepared for. No, it's okay. I understand. But if it isn't too much trouble, could I use your bathroom? The walk was short, I know, but I didn't expect to have to go so badly. The stranger asked eagerly. Ah, what the hell, sure. He'll probably be mad at me because I got him a regular cake instead of an ice cream cake anyway. Hevecta shrugged as she opened her back door. Hevecta's home looked like a typical suburban home. The downstairs had cheesy 70s striped white and yellow wallpaper that looked newly installed. The furniture consisted of all dark, mahogany-stained dressers and chairs. The sofa was covered in the plastic that furniture is usually covered in when it is first received, and an abstract white rug ran across the entirety of the living room floor. The home smelled of freshly perfumed upholstery. The stranger was amazed at how particularly clean the space looked. You have a lovely home. Thank you. The downstairs bathroom is down the hall. Last door to the left, Hevecta directed. As the stranger made his way to the bathroom, Hevecta began unpacking all of her groceries and the cake. Once in the bathroom, the stranger stood a while, flushed the toilet, and ran the sink water to allude that he had used the bathroom. Sitting on the toilet, he honed in on his plan. Okay, I didn't see the boyfriend, so he must be upstairs or something. If I'm quick, I can duct tape her mouth and zip tie her hands and feet without risk of her making too much noise. From the sound of it, I think she's already being abused here, so it should be relatively easy. Good thing I was able to buy all this stuff from that supermarket earlier. It will come in very handy. The stranger rose, ready to enact his plan on Hivekta. He tried the bathroom door and was met with unknown resistance. Confused, he pushed at the door with his shoulder with all his might to no avail. "Hey, I think I need a little help back here," the stranger yelled. "Oh, sorry. I forgot to mention that the door sometimes gets jammed. Let me see if I can help," Hivekta said from a distance, her voice growing louder as she walked closer. With one swift motion, she opened the door. As the stranger raised his hand to either incapacitate Hivekta or startle her again, he looked down and saw that he was met with the end of a very sharp hunting knife. One piercing to the appendix, and one quick slice under the armpit of the stranger's raised arm, and he plopped to the floor. Blood sputtered and drained from him in the matter of a minute. Hivekta dragged him into the bathroom with inhuman strength. She then reached for the bone, saw she had stowed away in the shower as she dismembered the stranger's body. "Hey, I'm home. Sorry I'm so late. You know how late they try to have us out on some of these construction sites," Hivekta's boyfriend stated as he entered the house. "Happy birthday," she yelled gleefully. "I made dinner and got you cake." Hivekta served up a red stew that smelled heavily of tomato and garlic. Large chunks of meat floated to the top as she ladled it into a bowl of steamed rice. After serving them both, Hivekta looked longingly into her boyfriend's eyes as he enjoyed his meal. "I got you a present, too," she said as she presented him with the poorly wrapped toolkit she had purchased from the store earlier that day. He ripped into it, unaware of the missing hunting knife. "I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of feeding my kids disgusting viscous for every meal," said the TV mother. The first thing I noticed was the black fungi sprouting on top of her head through her hair. I miss the good old days when we could eat bacon, turkey, and yams. But now all we got is viscous. Worse of all, our children can't get enough of this stuff." She turned away from the camera. "Oh, Timmy, Shelby, breakfast is ready." She set 2 plates of plain viscous on the kitchen table, out wide. A little boy and his sister rushed to their seats and started to shovel the dark goop greedily into their mouths. It stained their shirts and splashed onto their cheeks and dripped from their chins as they gobbled up the stuff. Nothing breaks my heart more than the thought of my precious children willingly intaking this poison, so that they grow giant black fungi on their bodies for the demons to eat," she continued. "Wow. Well, what if I told you that we don't have to take it anymore? What if I told you that all we have to do is band together and we can change everything?" She reached into the chest part of her retro cocktail dress and fished out a revolver. Right behind her unsuspecting kids, for goodness sake. "Damn it, I'm not gonna take it anymore, and neither should you. So call 1-800-I-REVOLT right now and join the soldiers of humanity. That's 1-800-400-73-8 658. Kill the demon oppressors. Save our children." The display TV went to static for a moment before it replayed the commercial. "She's a beaut, ain't she?" asked a sales associate in the department store I was wasting time in, a tall, pudgy man with his collared shirt tucked in. I didn't even see him approach me. "I mean, not really," I said. "Too much fungi growing out of her scalp. That's still a turn-off for me." "Huh? What? No. I'm talking about the TV." The associate smacked the display television on which I just watched the gun-toting mother of 2. 55 inches, 4K resolution. Best way to watch old ads. It's on sale for $12,200 or 4 installments of $300 plus tax. You won't find a better deal anywhere else. I looked back at the TV screen. How defiant the ad woman's eyes looked as she waved around her gun. "Sorry, but no. The ad caught my eye. That's all." "Wait, really?" said the associate. "You do realize the demons control what's on TV, right? I seriously doubt they care if we start hunting them down with shotguns and pistols. You see, the way to survive nowadays is to keep your skin as clean as possible. So, don't eat viscous. It's all there is to eat anymore." As I spoke, I noticed how clear the associate's skin looks, save for only one little black fungus growing from his cheek. Meanwhile, I got fungi running down the right side of my jaw and neck. "Did you get yours removed?" Instead of answering me, he took out a napkin from his pocket and scribbled on it with a pen. As he wrote, he looked around suspiciously, as if he was doing something taboo. He then forced a handshake on me to transfer the napkin to my hand. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Go at night. Don't let demons know. This will save your life," before saying out loud, "Thank you for your business, sir. You are gonna love watching reruns on your brand new television." "What? Man, I'm just here for some batteries," I said while slipping the napkin into my back pocket. "Ah, come on, guy." The sales associate seemed genuinely disappointed. A new TV would be nice, but after the battery purchase, I only had enough money for bus fare and a couple of viscous burgers. On the bus ride home, a hippie woman kept preaching about salvation and how there's a better world waiting for all of us. Most everyone else begged her to shut up. I thought about the sales associate's words, how all the executive and CEO jobs are taken up by demons, how they took so much control from us, how they would laugh their asses off if we tried to rebel. 281 Grove Saint made me a bit optimistic though. Oh. At my work desk the next morning, I drummed its surface with fingers from one hand, while my other hand plays with the tiny black fungus growing on the top of my right helix. My computer mocked me with a blank white document. I was tasked with writing a Jersey Times article to promote the new viscous cheesecake that will be available for purchase in markets and restaurants across the nation. And I had to make it seem like the dessert won't taste like every other variation of viscous ever made. The Times was supposed to be unbiased, but ever since a demons took over the editor-in-chief role, times have changed. "Hey, James." Ernie, the managing editor, leaned against my cubicle wall, sucking on a viscous milkshake through a straw all day. He was a short, stocky, and bald with an annoying, nasally voice. He looked grotesque with all the fungi covering his face, the worst I've ever seen on a single person. "How's the article coming along?" "Great, Ernie." The words just flow out of me. I didn't try to hide my sarcasm. He sipped his milkshake long enough for it to be awkward. Meanwhile, I stared at his nose, which at that point morphed into a large fungus, and wondered if that was the cause of his nasally voice. I also noticed how the milkshake viscous, which is just a colder liquid version of normal viscous, stained his lips after that prolonged sip. "You know, the best way to find inspiration is to try a sample for yourself," he said. "There's a few slices of cheesecake still in the break room fridge. You realize that all food tastes the same, right?" He sipped his milkshake again. "I think the cheesecake tastes sweeter than my birthday cake, actually. And I've loved birthday cake ever since I was little. Well, anyway, I'll need that article written by 3 p.m. For some reason, I felt a touch of admiration for Ernie where disgust usually resided. He was so positive, so easygoing, so content. He's older than me, but has accepted how things worked as though he were 10 years old. Would I find that same level of peace if I stopped worrying about what I couldn't change and go through life ignoring the deplorable conditions thrusted upon humanity? There were 2 fridges in the break room, and one of them chilled 10 paper plates of individual slices of viscous cheesecake, each one preserved in cling plastic wrap. Each one plastic wrap. I took one for myself, as well as a plastic fork from one of the drawers by the sink. I had to admit, the demons were clever. The cheesecake crust isn't made of smooshed graham crackers, just like Viscous Burgers buns aren't actually bread, nor is there actual whipped cream in viscous milkshakes. The things we consume aren't viscous-flavored things. It's all just viscous. They only take the shape of classic foods. Otherwise, everyone would have just eaten the non-viscous parts from the start. Armed with this knowledge, I still, naively, expected the cheesecake to taste as sweet as Ernie said. As sweet as I faintly remember sweet to be. Such misguided thinking made the first bite of cheesecake even more disappointing. It tasted literally like everything else. I threw the rest of the dessert in the trash. I could not give in like Ernie did. In fact, I was ashamed of Ernie, just as I was with the Times. I marched back to my desk, to the blank white document, and revolted, not with a gun but with words. I wrote the truth in my article, then emailed Ernie the document, essentially a resignation letter. I made up my mind that night to visit 281 Grove. Saint, it felt like a leap of faith, like if this place didn't hold some sort of miracle, then all hope would be lost. Walking along Mercer Saint, I passed by potholes and broken street lamps and fungi-riddled rat carcasses and homeless tents and other signs that no money was being invested into the city anymore. One bearded guy sat on the concrete in front of his tent. Without a word, he kept his eyes on me. His head shook the whole time, the fungi on his forehead that resembled antennas wiggling independently. I wasn't sure if he had Parkinson's or if he was trying to warn me of something. I noticed a couple of figures in the distance, outlines in the dark that became more prominent the closer I got. We were going to reach the Grove Saint intersection at the same time, so there was no avoiding them. I could have stopped, or hid somewhere, or quickly turned the corner. I should have known better, given how dangerous it is to wander the streets alone this time of night, but curiosity compelled me to stay the course. One outline seemed slim and composed like a model, the other a hulking presence looming behind. We converged under a working street lamp, and the first one into the light was a girl in a pink bikini. Well, I assumed it's a girl, and I'm assuming she's young purely based on the curve of her body, but her skin was so severely covered in black fungi that I couldn't even name her ethnicity. I stood frozen at her grotesque appearance. I could tell by her pleading eyes that she'd rather my reaction be more of concern, or even heroism. Stumbling behind her, a giant. No, worse, a demon. A one-eyed, fangy, anthropomorphic pig-looking thing with skin as dark as shadow, as wide as the side of a car, as dense as a boulder, and as tall as, well, it was freaking huge. It wore a light purple double-breasted suit with the buttons undone and the yellow tie loosened. I wasn't impressed by its tailor's craftsmanship, only because I thought I was going to crap myself at that moment. I've only ever seen demons on the internet. It stopped as I did, which was how I could tell it looked woozy. Intoxicated, in fact. The girl stopped as well only because the demon had her on a diamond-studded leash around her neck. "I know where you're going," it said, its voice surprisingly very human-like. "Bastide." I took a step back. "Please don't hurt me," was all the words I found. It waved me off. "Dumbass, I'm drunk," it said. "Besides, we wait till you die from, like, car accidents or disease or shit. Then we eat you. I mean, like, haha, you all just hide if we hunt ya. Who wants to fucking hunt, bro?" "What?" "Whatever, human, do your research. Or some. You want $10. It pulled from its blazer pocket a stack of $500 bills. "You'll need it where you're going." I don't understand. Why are you offering me money?" No more questions. Dance. Dance for me. Dance for money. I didn't seem to have much of a choice here, nor was I sure how it wanted me to dance given that there was no music. So I did this leg wiggle jig I used to do at parties in college long ago. I did this for several minutes. Meanwhile, the girl it had on a leash recorded me with a cell phone I didn't know she had. "Okay, stop, stoop," cried the demon. I leaned against my bent knees, tired and out of shape. "You suck at dancing. Fuck out of my face." It threw the stack of cash at me, the band holding them together, breaking in the process, so the bills fell around me like rain. Yay. I grabbed the $500 bills off the ground as fast as I could before running home. As I did so, I heard the demon laughing at me as it and its pet walked away. Still heated from my embarrassment the previous night, I called 1-800-I-REVOLT first thing in the morning. Luckily, the lady who answered said they were on their way to the heights where the demons live, but were more than happy to turn around to pick me up. I didn't even need my own gun. They had extras. The banner along the beat-up white van that pulled up at my apartment read Champions of Salvation as opposed to Soldiers of Humanity, which I assumed was a remarketing campaign. Inside the van sat 14 armed men and women, with me making number 15. But they all seemed more cheerful than expected. A hippie lady gave me a big hug before I climbed aboard. A middle-aged man who sat next to me handed me a Glock with the most gleeful grin, before he too gave me a tender embrace. Here I was, stewing in my own anger and anxiety, my heart racing over the brutal fight to come, while everyone else held hands and sang gospel songs like they were attend a black church. I could have only concluded that they were ready for death, and that they knew their actions today would serve the ultimate goal of human liberation. It was admirable, honestly. The Heights has become a gated community of mansions, office buildings, restaurants, and parks that only the demons had access to. Instead of busting through the gate like a badass, the van's driver waited for the gate to open the path for us. Something wasn't right. We parked in the middle of a quiet, gorgeous neighborhood on Columbia Ave. I played along with the group as we exited the van and formed a circle with our backs to each other. "Demons!" shouted the hippie lady. My heart skipped a beat as demon women and children watched us on their third-story balconies. "You have taken everything from us, but today we will show you that death is still on our own terms." Everyone pointed their pistols, their shotguns, their rifles, at their own heads. "We bid you all adieu. I guess suicide is an option. The food is bland and messy and makes us sick. Financial freedom is an impossibility. Black fungi make us unattractive. No one knows how to deal with the demons who control our suffering. And apparently, revolution efforts have proven ineffective a long time ago. Still, as guns went off and the demon community cheered and blood spattered all around me, I dropped my gun and screamed hysterically for a while until one of the demon aides, a human, offered to drive me home because the neighborhood grew bored of my traumatic outburst 10 minutes ago. Other aides collected the bodies around me. 281 Grove, St. My Last Hope. 2 days have passed since the incident at the Heights, but I was still shaking. I needed something. I didn't want to accept the world as it was, but I didn't want to die, and I certainly had no more fight in me. I remembered the sales associate from before telling me to go at night. I was deathly afraid of running into that demon from before, but I didn't this time. Whatever this place is about, demons already know it, and they didn't care. At 281 Grove, Saint stood a rundown building where a heavy bass could be heard from outside, flashing green and blue lights shining through the dirty windows. Inside, I discovered humanity's real last stand: tequila, vodka, weed, cocaine, and Michael Jackson. The place was packed with partier, all stylish and gorgeous and 90s. I thought I'd stick out because of my traumatized face, but really, it's because of the fungi. I had so much of it, and everyone else had hardly any. I couldn't believe it. There was a cure. I squeezed my way through the crowd until I found a door at the back with a sign that read, "The Stuff." When I knocked on the door, it was answered by two large bodyguards. Do you have, the stuff?" I asked, not sure what I was asking for. $5, one of them barked. It was a good thing kept that money the demon threw at me. The bodyguards locked the door behind us and guided me down a staircase to a basement. The lighting down there was the only normal thing I saw that night. At the bottom, a hunched-over old man in a lab coat stood in front of a portable panel room divider. "Ah, I see this is your first time," the scientist man said in a German accent. "Yes, your fungi will shrink and will hardly grow back, but it only lasts for 6 months. You will have to come back regularly." He pulled back the room divider to reveal 3 people resting on gurneys with eyes sticking out of their arms. Each of their skin was fungus-free, but their eyes looked a bit glazed. Moreover, clumps of flesh have been removed from each of their arms, revealing redness and bone. "Now, the real question," said the scientist. "Would you prefer white meat, dark meat, or yellow meat?" "You should get you some dark meat, honey," one of the gurney-bound said, an African-American woman. "We got a bet going." I said nothing. I only watched as the scientist took a hunting knife and started carving the flesh from the woman's forearm. "Tee-hee, that tickles," she cried. Blood poured onto the ground. The scientist slapped the flesh on a paper plate and threw it in a microwave that sat on a stool discreetly along the wall. Microwaved human flesh. That was the cure. And all those partiers upstairs already had some. I puked. All hope is lost. I should have used that $5 to buy a TV. Attempt 31. Thursday. Me and my assistant Anita stood by the monkey cage in the laboratory, a dimly lit basement, closely monitoring what was happening. The concoction had caused the monkey's nails to grow several times longer, turning into claws. But not only the nails had grown. The concoction provoked a transformation. The monkey was bigger, fiercer. The beast looked around, as if newly awakened, and then unprovokedly attacked the bars of the cage. The metal rang. Luckily, the monkey wasn't as strong as a forest elephant. After 30 attempts, it wrapped its arms around itself, as though hugging itself. Admittedly, the experimental objects were animals, but they seemed to be able to simulate something reminiscent of human pain. The discovery was fascinating, but unfortunately not the aim for this study. Anita stomped her foot. Her sky-blue eyes flickered for a moment. I scribbled down my impressions of the reactions and icy sounds of the beast, but when I looked up from my notes, the monkey was pulling large tufts of bloody fur from its shoulders. I sighed. Another failure. I shook my head and stroked my beard. The monkey pulled and teared, and the upper part of the back became bloodier and balder. Muscles and membranes shone in the dim light. But despite the pain, or at least the simulation of it, the monkey's rage grew, and it continued to skin its back, until only a few pieces of fur hung between its shoulders. It failed to reach there. It sat surrounded by bloody piles of fur with a bare back. The blood flowed, and the scent seemed to excite the beast. It chewed on its shoulder, and discovered that there was more fur on its belly. The claws pierced the skin and underlaying abdominal muscles. I wished to look away, but as a scientist, it would be misconducted to obey my impulses. Rationality must conquer the emotions. Wasn't that the reason Vihanril created us? The human that knows that she knows. A being separated from beasts. An animal would have backed away. Primitive creatures wouldn't conduct an experiment, and I needed to understand all details to improve the concoction. So, I observed. All previous subjects had died of blood loss and internal injuries, or because they could not tolerate some of the ingredients in the concoction. But this was the first time any of the test subjects performed autocannibalism. The beast tore long ropes of intestines out of the abdominal cavity, unraveled by mesentery, and ate them. The metallic smell of blood and fresh flesh stung my nose. I gulped. Anita put her hand over her mouth, turned around and walked away. I reached for her, but realized that I had nothing to give her, and went for the crossbow instead. I must put that abomination down. Presumably the hyoscyamin, one of the key ingredients of my concoction, caused this otherworldly tantrum. You only extract it from the poisonous nightshades such as witch cabbage, mandrake, and bola roach. None of them, however, as enriched with the substance as thorn apple which I use. And I needed high doses of hyoscyamin to be able to trigger the transformation. The side effects of the high dose was, however, hallucinations and tantrums. Given that I mixed several different substances with each other, the hyoscyamin from thorn apple may have been enhanced by some other ingredient in some word cocktail effect. Could I find out how? I may have to increase the dose of thamine, a substance from elfantime that relieves the pain, simulated or not, that thorn apple inflicted, as well as functioning as a muscle relaxant. Yes, that must be the answer. An increased thiamine dose should calm the test subject, so that the negative side effects of thorn apple wouldn't frighten it, or make it furious. Thiamine might even make it enjoy the transformation. I should keep the same amount of thorn apple-derived hyoscyamin, but I must increase the amount of elfantime-derived timin even more. Weighing the leather purse with elfantime in my hand, I concluded, is too light. Dusk. Sunday. The beginning of the harvest month. We landed by my go-to elfantime location outside the village Okafameha, a tious ride from my hometown Gudfus. I tied my wing beast to a tree outside the burial ground, on the perfect distance for not awakening the wraiths and their fury, but also for being a fast escape route. The beast folded its long wings over its back, waiting in a quadrupedal pose. Its long neck curved when it turned its elongated head towards me. The silhouette was dim under the light of the full twin moons. This was a magical night. The large burial mound was surrounded by several moss-covered graves and monuments. This was a perfect locale for elfantime. The burial area was no longer used by the villagers, since they went to the cemeteries where the memorial stones stood in rows. Here the graves were located around the largest hill, and at first glance they seemed to be all over the place. From above, the graves, however, created an intricate spiral pattern, starting from the hilltop. The ingenuity of my ancestors was reverent, and pride swelled in the breast. I was their offspring. Still, the hand sought the symbol of Vianril, the hammer and the womb. It comforted me as I took steady steps towards the largest burial mound, a passage tomb situated on the hilltop. The graves looked unassuming, several covered in peat. Some were overshadowed by some large ash, oak, or rowan. Their roots dug deep into the monuments. Cattle grazed freely here, according to old traditions, as the burial ground was part of the outfields of Okafamega. The awe-inspiring passage tomb had been erected on the large hill that I ascended. The scent of the summer night was heavy. The air always vibrated with something ancient here. The hill must be a remnant from some ice age. It had been extended vertically, with large boulders, which formed the foundation of the passage tomb. Did my ancestors use forest elephants or other ancient megabeasts to move the boulders? An ancient oak the size of a cottage had its standing place on the foundation, its roots giving the boulders ghostly contours reminiscent of spiders. At the top of the foundation sat, what at first glance looked like the top of the hill, the grave itself. Leading up to it was a bluntly square corridor, 10 fathoms in length, almost a fathom high. The passage was the only man-made thing that nature hadn't crawled back over. There they were, outside the passage tomb entrance, in the silver light of the twin moons, a blooming carpet of fragrant and evergreen elfin thyme. They had reddish-violet densely gathered flowers, spring bed straw, Freya bed straw, Kvendel, hill bumblebee, Batfadas seprif on Verdum itself. A beloved child bears many names. The inside of the grave was, thank Vianril, not my goal. I readied my purse and knife to collect flowers. I had to gather enough for many concoctions, but if I picked them all, there would be fewer for future use. A tough balance. This was the only place with active elfin thyme within a day's flight from Gudfus. A creaking sound above me. I took a few steps back without thinking. Slemma, I hissed. A corpse sat on top of the passage of the tomb, with the oak as a throne behind. The body was clad in a worn, ragged robe that still looked somewhat noble, despite the eternal gnawing of decay. The skin was stretched, taut as leather, around the bones and tendons. The eyes were closed and desiccated. Jewelry adorned its ears, neck, and robe. The creaking must have been the hand falling out of the lap. My heart raced and I tried to calm it with deep breaths. How could I have missed the carcass on my arrival? Last time I foraged here, countless wraiths had chased me, and I almost dropped my purse with elfin thyme. Without the wing beast, I would have joined a congregation of the dead. The heartbeat was by no means calmed by the memory. It was said that some people indulged in outsitting to acquire the knowledge of dead spirits. The mind of these people must be corrupted. I gulped, sneaked up to the flowers, and squatted down to continue collecting. My pulse rushed in my ears and pressed on my intestines, and I breathed deeply, so as not to get nauseous, and to avoid cutting myself. Regularly, I took quick looks at the corpse. It was probably not a wraith, for it had not moved an inch. I worked quickly, but carefully. Stressed, I leaved every third flower. The last ones grew by the entrance to the passage tomb. I crawled there, anything for science, my people, and my benefactor. I picked as many flowers as I dared, and got up. I relaxed. I was done. I had my leather purse in a tight grip. Black, shining gaze. I backed away with a shout, stumbling on my feet. The eyes of the corpse were open and he grabbed my arm. I fell, but he had me in an iron grip. My fingers closed spasmodically around the purse. Heart pounding in the chest. This was new. A trap? A rattling, crackling sound. The laughter of the wraith? Was it mocking me? Who were you? I was surprised by how rough my voice was. However, not comparable with the ancient creaking of the wraith, as of bones rubbed against each other. Alfrey! The wraith laughed, but drilled his black, glowing gaze into me. The vocal cords must have been eaten by the tooth of time or of someone else, but the specter still spoke. Wraiths, Draugr, were different from other ghosts, who through unsolved deeds lingered after their death. Wraiths, on the other hand, were undead malevolent people who returned to haunt the living. This must have been a black-hearted earl calling himself an elf. We were hardly related. The flame of rage was lit inside me. May Vihanril curse you, elf Draugr, I roared. May the elves forever burn. I couldn't bend myself out of the grip of the elf Draugr without letting go of my purse. Helplessness trembled in me, which made the fire inside rage even more. "What do you want from me?" I found a solution and threw the purse towards the wing beast. "Thiefer!" the wraith shouted. "Back time belonger Alfor." "Why, you're dead!" I yelled, trying to pry open the wraith fingers while avoiding his other hand. "You bloody invader!" "Vilsne halfiti," grumbled the elf Draugr. "I namer Alfor. I borned higher. I am rikest af them allem." The wraith attacked me, roaring. The grip on my arm loosened just enough, and I tore the fingers apart. They cracked. With a pounding heart, I rolled to the side. The gust of wind caressed the cheek, and the smell of decay painfully made the breath stop. I jumped down the foundation, had a bad landing, and fell. I rolled a bit, crawled to my feet, sprinted to the pouch, grabbed it with a handful of grass, and mounted the wing beast. "Up, by Vahanril may Slema take you otherwise, wicked beast." It flapped and caught the wind in its membranous wings. We left the ground, my belly twitching, which was a familiar feeling that was now also soothing. I patted the beast and breathed out. A pair of black shining eyes sparkled up at us in anger. Still, something gnawed my mind. Was the wraith really an ancestor? "Thiefor, back time belongir Alfor, Vilsne halfiti." I didn't envy the villagers of Okafamega. They would have a rough, haunted night. But thank you, Vihanril, for life, and for granting me my elfin time. Now when I had enough of the ingredient, the experiment was entering a whole new phase. I have never seen myself as the Bobby Flay or Gordon Ramsay type of chef, but more of the David Chang, Anthony Bourdain type. Rough, underground, an enemy to normal, an unacknowledged pioneer. I wish I could tell you a good story about how my love for cooking began in a small village in France. That my first oyster, slithery, slimy, and foreign, popped the bubble in my mind, and the rest is history. But the truth is, it is that the names above are who made me want to cook. I did not discover my love for cooking in the kitchen or at a restaurant, but instead in front of my TV screen. My first love was the show Chopped. Oh, how exciting it was! Like putting together a puzzle made of food. The contestants were given 5 ingredients that they had to make work together, no matter how different. Octopus and cranberries? What a challenge! Goat cheese and beef liver? How criminal! I can't stop watching. Show me, chef. Show me how you will make this disaster of ingredients work together to form a beautiful main course dish. The losers were kicked off or chopped after each round: appetizer, main course, and dessert. The only thing that could have made it more entertaining was if Ted Allen chopped off the losing contestant's pinky finger. As I grew into my teens, my love changed channels from the food channel to the travel channel, where I found my first food idol, Bourdain himself. Calling him an idol would probably make him puke in his mouth, but his true love for food, places, and people, and I mean a love that jumped through the screen, was always something that would grab a hold of me. He was charming, rough around the edges, and clearly knew what he was talking about when it came to food. I'll never forget his rule, that in order to be responsible enough to make love to a woman, a young man must be able to cook her an omelet in the morning. Now that's social responsibility. For a young man of 17, that was all I needed to hear to begin my cooking journey. Women were on my mind the first time. Nervous and sweaty. The parallels were uncanny, but I'll save you the details. Today, as a 32-year-old bachelor still searching for love, I turn to cooking to escape isolationism. Maybe you were hoping for some story of how I went on to become a top chef, and now I'm some sort of a mix between a rock star and a chef. Unfortunately, those dreams have long passed, and instead my days are filled with meetings regarding medical supplies and the new wonder drug. Part of me is kind of glad that food is not my whole life, but instead is a path for escape. An escape from work, the real world, and failed relationships. All of it makes me sick to think about. If I don't cook, all I think about is the negative. Cooking helps me to focus on a task, be creative, and melt the evil thoughts away. The evil thoughts make me feel enclosed, trapped. No way out, suffocating. I force myself to cook, and that is where I find myself tonight. The steaks have been sitting out for 45 minutes. They are seasoned with salt and pepper. Nice and simple. The pan is set to medium hot, perfectly warm. The oil inside heating up. The garlic is diced and fills the kitchen with a unique aroma that I love. Linger by the Cranberries plays on my speaker system throughout the apartment, and it makes me warm inside. This in combination with the wine. A rough, acoustic red wine from the south of France. My favorite for a Thursday night. Cooking is a perfect excuse just to slow down and reflect. I can stop to process the whole day and focus on small tasks for prepping. Oh shit. My elbow bumped into the wine bottle. It was only filled with a half of a glass of wine, but now it's all over the tile floor. The dark red covers the floor and makes my stomach tighten. It looks like spilled blood. But it's not. Blood on the tile is stickier and doesn't splatter as much as the wine did. I am such a klutz. I am just an idiot. Ow! The glass cut me. I'm bleeding. Now that is blood. The deep, familiar red that flows inside and out of the human body. It runs down my hand and begins to drip on the pale tile food. Red drops splatter sporadically, creating some sort of fucked up art project. I cover the 2-inch long cut with a paper towel and pick up the rest of the pieces of glass. Why can't I have nice things? Why can't I have one night that goes smoothly? I am such a fuck-up. No, no, no. The bread in the oven is smoking. Ugh. I am the king of mess-ups. Once it rains, it pours, is what Mother said when she was still alive. I take out the burnt garlic bread and put it on the counter. The burnt smell is repulsive. My wine bottle is shattered, but at least my heart is intact. I can't help but be reminded of when Rachel broke that wine bottle 5 years ago. Ha! She didn't know how to handle me. I need a woman who can handle all of this. I told her who I truly was. You'd think after 3 months of dating she'd be able to handle the real me. But women just don't get me at all. They never have, and they never will. Mother didn't, and I've yet to meet a woman who comes close. Mother at least didn't run away. She didn't break things off with me like Rachel tried to. I can't lie, I loved Rachel a lot. Despite her inability to cook eggs Benedict, she meant a lot to me. We would travel all over, camp in the woods, hike a peak, or even venture occasionally to a new food truck selling food from a part of the world neither of us had ever tasted. She made the best tomato soup you have ever tasted. It reminded me of a childhood filled with shivering nights and warm bowls of soup with salty crackers. At one point, I thought she was the one. Even more critically, I thought that she thought that I was the one. How foolish of me. You think you know someone and then they turn out to not only be a liar, she didn't love me, but a manipulator. She was always choosing where to go eat. I didn't want to hurt Rachel, I swear. I was just really angry back then. When I told her I had killed for her and would do it again, that bottle slipped right through her hands like a muddy pig. How could she not love that I had carried out the most manly task ever? I did it all for her. But she began to talk about police and reports and leaving. I told her that the ex-boyfriend who did that thing to her was evil. And evil people deserve what comes to them. I killed him because I loved her. Why couldn't she understand this? I got rid of one less evil person in the world, and how I am repaid. Accusations and name-calling, threats and screaming were all I heard from her that night. Lots of screaming. Father taught me that if people truly love you, then they won't run. He didn't teach me a lot, with a liquor bottle in one hand and a wooden bat in the other, but he did teach me how to take care of a situation that goes south. If only Mother knew when to keep her mouth shut. Rachel threatened me with jail. The same home as my father, she gave me no choice but to. I don't like thinking about it. The anger took over me. You know, one might think it would be like butchery, but in fact it was more like that one scene from Goodfellas with the razor and garlic. Intricate care. Precise slicing. Surgery. Not slashing and chopping. I'm no monster. I'm not the American Psycho bullshit. I have flaws. But we all have flaws. I admit part of me is sorry, and part of me is ashamed of what I did, but part of me isn't, because the night I did that to Rachel was the night I found my true love for cooking. Yes, it felt wrong at first, but I now admit I crave it. However, I am a man of discipline. Once a year, I permit myself a night to cook a meal of this standard. I spend all year carefully scouting. A beginner's mistake at the Saturday morning market is taking home the first piece of produce you find. You must be picky. As a cook and as a human, you must be picky regarding the produce you consume. I was careful. I chose it very carefully. There were many options this year. Many I didn't go for. Too small, too many drugs, too much alcohol. But then I saw her. Perfect in every way. Hourglass figure and healthy. I saw her at Cordson's acai bowl shop every Tuesday after my Pilates class. She kept catching my eye. I caught hers. And I knew she was going to be interested. It began with a date at a small Indian joint. Something spicy, something to put away any nerves. We talked about poetry and Frank Sinatra. She was an old soul like me. It was a pity her future was predetermined. She was nice, but who knows what kind of evil I would have discovered about her if we had kept going on dates. On the surface, she was too good for me. We both knew it. From what she said about herself, she had many friends. I couldn't relate. Her name was Vicky. Much like a well-prepared acai bowl, she was nothing but a treat to be devoured by this world. The only question is, does she need a little more coriander before we put her in the pan?